Hey, Internet. Am I ready? No, I'm not. That's right. I'm back, sort of. Huh. Try to do a little review, little planning, little annual structure and thinking and design the last few days, and then you know what happened? I got hit with such a cold. Oh my goodness. It's still here. I may hack a few times during this thing, but it's not what it was. Oh my goodness, what a thing. So I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but nonetheless, I'm going to be doing a podcast here in a couple of hours and getting it out to you. It's a new guest. It's a first time. I'm excited. It's a fairly controversial topic. I'm just going to leave it at that and then maybe pitch it again a little at the end of this. But for now, I do want to throw out at you some viewer response, a viewer question. So here we're going to go. We're going to dig right into this. When I switched, it went over to that. Good to know. I've talked about this before, and yet the way this is going to hit, I think it'll give us some new things to talk about. So we have a question, and then we have another question within the question. As the viewer wrote in, see, now I'm getting sounds from you guys doing, I don't know why that is. A viewer wrote in, asking me a question about someone else who asked him a question, right? And so that's what we really want to dig into is the question that was asked of the viewer. So here, anyway, I wrote a friend the following, see below, PhD computer science, Christian, but a believer in science more than the Bible. And he asked me for more info or substantiation or explanation. That's why I am now writing to you. And if you're the one who wrote this to me, I'm sorry. There's just a lot of comments that have come in, and this is as soon as I could get this one, so I am sorry if this was not timely enough. I would have liked to be able to use this or have this at your disposal. So this is the following that he wrote to his friend, I guess, in the conversation. And then his friend asked for a little more info, right? But I think these questions are good questions, and I don't know, maybe there's a different way to go about it, but they do kind of strike at the heart of the matter. Although I would go one deeper on this. So, the questions are, do you hold to a literal classical grammatical approach to Genesis? That's a good question, but probably needs a little unpacking. Do you believe that the Creator had the power to create our world and universe in 6 literal days? That's a very good question. Maybe again could be more simple, but it's spot on. Do you believe in the story of the flood and Jonah and the whale? Now, while that is a valuable question for a Christian particularly, anybody who claims to be a Christian, it's a little more off the center here, right? It's not quite as connected to where the heart of the argument is. And the reason why that's important is you want to stay close to where the heart of the argument is so they don't get into the weeds arguing something that really isn't going to help the conversation move in a positive direction at all. So, and FYI, viewer, again, I don't agree with the answers in Genesis. The answers are in Romans. And while I'm with you on not thinking everything Answers in Genesis does is awesome, I'm also not opposed to when they do make a point. And you got to be able to give the orange man his due, right, as it were. And if he makes a good point, he makes a good point. It just is what it is. Don't ad hominem, right? So, but you're right. I agree that as a Christian, the whole thing starts with Romans. It does not start with Genesis. It starts with Romans. It starts with the New Testament. It starts with Jesus. And this is where, okay, we're going to get to this. I don't want to forget this order here. Boom, boom. Hopefully I can remember that right there. That's where it really has to come back to if you're arguing with a Christian. All right, so answered Romans. That's why evolution collapses because of our mortalities. Agreed. Evolution is not compatible with death, according to the Apostle Paul in Romans. Agreed. So I'm not entirely sure what you're looking for from me here other than he wants more explanation. So let's start with where I would start, right? What did you not say? What did you not ask? And as I look back at it again, a Christian but a believer in science more than the Bible. So that's the question, isn't it? I had a conversation just today, randomly, unexpectedly, with a gentleman who is a Christian, although he never would use the word. It was really interesting. He never called himself a Christian. He kept calling himself a follower of Jesus. And as we talked, I said, you just kind of got to know that I'm a Missouri Synod pastor. It means we're kind of, we're these Bible believing guys, right? We're really stodgy and think it's true and stuff, and it's kind of what we do. and yet he was kind of surprised later when I pointed out, a disagreement. I said, well, I wouldn't disagree with that. And he came, well, why is that? And I explained it, and he kind of got offended. I was like, well, come on, man. like this is what we are. I wish he kept coming back to, but I'm a follower of Jesus. But I'm a follower of Jesus. And I wish I'd asked this question right then. I didn't have it on the way home. Of course, you've had this happen, right? You're driving back and you're like, oh, I should have said this. I wish like the fifth time he said, I'm a follower of Jesus, I had just said, is Jesus risen from the dead? And just dropped it right there and waited for him, right? And if he'd said yes, I'd say, I got one more for you, right? Is he also God? And if he said yes, I'd be like, sweet, we're brothers. We may disagree about a lot of stuff. We're brothers. Awesome. We're good, man. We're good. We're not enemies. Yeah. But if the answer is not yes to both those questions, I don't care what kind of follower you think you are. You ain't. I do not know you is the words waiting for you on the last day. So this is where the real rubber that hits the road is. I'm a Christian, but I believe in science. I believe in science. You got me. I wish I had that clip right now to throw in there. Always judging me. The rubber has to hit the road with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So that's where I would start, right? You want to argue about Romans 5? Because that is where it is. What's Romans 5 about? Is Romans 5 really about Adam? Or is it really about Jesus? It's really about Jesus. Jesus the Christ, who is risen from the dead as the new Adam. Now, the argument Paul makes that he's the new Adam doesn't make any sense if there wasn't a first Adam, right? If the first Adam's just a story, a symbol, then the second Adam's just a story and a symbol too. You can't have your cake and eat it too, and that phrase has never made sense, but you know what I meant. It's a weird phrase. Doesn't make any sense. But it means what it means, apparently, is a colloquialism. Anyhow, you cannot claim that Romans 5 is literal about Jesus and his resurrection and not literal about Adam. That doesn't make any sense. Forget the death part, like death being our problem or whatever. Just the part about Jesus being risen from the dead. Is it true or not? Do you believe it or not? That's where you start. Because if his answer is yes, now he's on your turf. Nah? And if his answer is no, well, now you know exactly where he stands. He's not a Christian. Nah, there's no, I'm sorry, you can say I'm judging you. I'm judging you. I ain't judging. You can call me a judgmental if you want. Like the definition of a Christian is a guy who believes that Jesus is risen from the dead. You can be a girl too. A person who believes that Jesus is risen from the dead. And that he's God. That's it. I mean, the creeds pretty much come down to that. Father, Son, Spirit being Trinity. Yeah, but it all comes out of Jesus, the God-man, being not dead anymore. So once you have that established, you can move to these other issues, these other questions, right? But that's really where you want to go. And so now don't leave Matthew yet, right? So let's just stick with Matthew and Jesus being risen from the dead in Matthew. This is the same guy who in Matthew, I said that really badly, in Matthew, it's the same guy who in Matthew, that sounds much smarter when I say it that way. It's the same guy who when asked about divorce, when asked about whether a man could marry, was it a woman? A woman could marry 6, 7 men and then die, and whose wife, spouse, who would they be in paradise or all that stuff? He's like, yeah, whatever. You guys don't even know what you're talking about. Around and in that question, Jesus says, from the beginning, it was not so, meaning divorce. It was not so. But Moses, I think this is maybe, I'm throwing a little mark in here. Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, gave you divorce. But from the beginning, it was not so. And then he quotes Moses. He doesn't just quote Moses, he quotes Torah/Genesis. Not just Genesis chapter 1 and 2. That the man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two become one flesh. I mean, that is the heart and center of Genesis 1 and 2. The narrative creation from 2 different angles. 6 days, all of it being made on the ground, watching day 6 as Adam's brought out of the earth. So Jesus, this guy who you think rose from the dead, thinks Adam was a real dude and Eve was a real woman who were made to get married to each other and stay married. Okay? We're just doing Jesus and Matthew right now, right? But however you're going to conceive of creation after this, or whatever, forget creation. Let's not use that word. It's too offensive, right? However you're going to conceive of that world out there, whatever happened, whatever Big Bang you believe in, because you also believe in science, has to have man and woman like just kind of there, magically there, immediately there, because that's the beginning, Jesus says. Or Or you believe in Jesus being risen from the dead, but you don't believe in his ability to leave behind any words for us to know about it, right? That's your other option. Well, that one line was put in later. Okay, whatever, man. At that point, it's all put in. Whatever. You pick and choose, I pick and choose. Yay, you don't believe any of it. I don't know how you believe Jesus is risen at that point. So either Jesus is risen from the bed, from the bed, that too, I suppose. Either Jesus is risen from the dead and makes good on his promise to send the Holy Spirit to call to mind everything that he has said to us, so that when his apostles write down a few things for us to remember once for all, delivered to the saints and all that stuff, right? The pillar and foundation of the truth, that kind of thing. Once they write all that down, that this is sort of what we should kind of go to in terms of this God who is man's ideas. And one of these ideas is that man and woman were there like that, right? In the beginning. Oh, well, that means the first day then. No. Why would you do that? He's quoting Moses. He believes in Moses. He does this with David. He does this with Isaiah. And that's not random, by the way. There are three major categories in the Old Testament: Moses, the prophets, and the writings. You know who's the chief representatives? Well, Moses, obviously. Torah, he did the whole thing. But Torah, prophets, writings. The chief people: Moses, Isaiah, and, oh, there you go, David. So he hat tips the whole Old Testament. So again, you believe Jesus is risen, you believe he's God, but you don't believe the things he believed. That's weird, right? I'm not saying you're going to hell. I'm saying that's weird. It's an odd position to take. And your reason is what again? Science. Okay, science, a French word that means knowledge. Very good. Knowledge, right? Oh, you mean the scientific method and logic. Good. So testing what we can observe to see if it happens again so we can know it to be sure. That's awesome. That's totally cool. That's not what theories always are, right? You have to have an hypothesis be able to be judged according to repetitive value. Yeah? And so I mean, you can do the math. Do all your high math and figure out when the Great Big Bang was or whatever, right? It's like the Great Pumpkin. Cool. Good for you. It's a theory. It's a theory, which is why ultimately, and it's amazing to me how often you'll hear this in the language. They don't talk about, well, you believe in Christianity and I deduce science. They don't say that. They say, I believe in science. There's a reason for that. Because they have to. Because it's a religion to them. Oh, science isn't a religion, it's only logic. Yeah, okay, whatever, man. Step back, be objective, be honest. Be honest. It is not scientific to believe in science or to deduce science. You can't deduce science. It's impossible. You can't deduce logic. It's impossible. I've done this before. I know what should I call them? The worshipers of logic, they don't like it. They don't want to admit that their God requires faith. And so they get all mad about this argument, but they don't have an actual answer. So that's the challenge here, right? So I win your little logic game. And it's this: if you want to show that logic is logical, you must assume the premise. It's like one of the first rules of logic. You can't do that. You're not allowed to assume the premise. You must start with two things that are not your answer, and by putting them together, get your answer. A cannot equal B because B equals A. So logic cannot be logical because it makes sense. That doesn't make sense. It's an assertion. It's a statement of faith. Now, I'm okay with that, honestly. I don't mind it being a statement of faith. I believe in logic. I believe it was created. I believe it's designed. And this is why, again, whenever you watch I love it. I mean, I really enjoy science shows. I don't watch a lot of TV anymore. It's kind of sad, I suppose. But I really enjoy like these Earth ones, right? Where they do the high-def video of like the frogs and the weird bugs that are like blowing their heads out, all this kind of crazy stuff. It's fascinating to me. And of course, they're always going to bring up evolution. Always. Although never with any real, I don't know what to call it, proof? All they'll do is just sort of assert the God of evolution has done this in some amazing way. And they really do it like a God, right? Because they don't say, and how it accidentally happened. They say, and how evolution designed, and how evolution designed, and how evolution... Constantly, they're dropping the word design in there. And it's like, so which one is it? Is it the God evolution who designed it all? Or is it the happenstance of chance and random chaos over an aeon upon aeons and billions isn't enough of history that just accidentally brought it here without reason, which would be without logic, which would be without science? So how can you even observe it? Because it doesn't exist in a thinkable state to begin with. What reason proceeded out of chaos and we're going to trust it randomly? That's odd. See, now I'm not mad at you. I just think it's not a very reasonable position. I think it's odd that you would come to this point, right? And then boast about it like you're this bastion of sincere non-self delusion. It's fully self-deluded. And if you could just admit that you hate the idea of the Christian God. Now, maybe this isn't everybody. This is not everybody, but this is a category. You hate the idea of the Christian God, and any talk about the deity or the superpower or whatever, the creator, makes you think of that Christian God, and you can't stand that idea. So rather than face that, which you don't like, and often it's not even the one of the Bible, it's whoever the cult you grew up in taught you it was. Okay, I get it. That sucked, right? I get it. I'm talking to actual atheists who are famous right now. 3 of them I've heard this story from. They're all from cults. It's amazing. And they all think it's fundamentalist Christianity, and it never is, which I would even say fundamentalist Christianity. Even I can't say it fast enough. Even fundamentalist Christianity is pretty messed up, but it ain't the cult that these things were. Anyhow, they're so upset about what they had happen to them in that they can't even conceive of intelligent design. I mean, it's just amazing to me. Or maybe the ancient aliens one, which is just, gotta love panspermia, man. Just so you can say panspermia. That's reasonable. Totally. Where'd the spermia come from? That's the question, ain't it then? Oh, are they divine beings? They'd be gods, wouldn't they then? Somehow you go back to something that's not us. Yeah? Now, again, if you're talking to the person who says, I believe Jesus is risen, I believe he's God, well, that's who it goes back to. And again, he points back to and says, from the beginning, Adam, woman. Huh? So now, when he also says, to Paul, my apostle, my ambassador, my deputy to the world, of the nations at least, to the non-Jews, the goyim, teach them, and he talk about a master in the Old Testament, by the way, the Pharisee of Pharisees, he knew it backwards and forwards, probably in multiple languages. When Paul then makes this argument in Romans 5, that Jesus is the replacement for Adam, I mean, the idea that this could be symbolic, if you think that, automatically undoes any hope of the resurrection. Jesus becomes just another nice story about social revolution. Listening to Joe Rogan today, really enjoying, I'm even going to share the name, really enjoying, although also really not liking his conversation. At the same time, Dr. Cornel West, very intelligent man, unbelievably well-spoken. I mean, I am so envious of his, I don't even have a good word. I was going to say vernacular, but that's totally wrong. It's way better than vernacular. I mean, he's so beyond vernacular, and vocabulary sounds so trite. He'd have a better word for that. It's unbelievable how well-spoken this guy is. And he makes some really amazing arguments, especially since that he's like a socialist, which I'm not always the biggest fan of, but he's got some really good thoughts. He keeps saying democracy, and I don't know what the word democracy means when he says it, which is, I'd like to hear that. But he also claims to be a Christian. But at other points in time, he says things like, there is no Messiah. There is no Savior. And it's like, so why are you following this Jesus guy? I don't get it. So if you're that, right? If you're that, well, then you have to believe that there is no resurrection. So then we go back to our thing, is he risen from the dead? And your answer is no. And then my answer is, I'm glad you think you're a Christian. That's not Christianity. Yeah, that's Christian philosophy or something like that. All right. So now your friend, where are they in all that? Yeah. And it's only after all that I'd go anywhere near Genesis. I would want them so solidly established on Jesus is God, and he says stuff and we should listen to it, right? Because he rose from the dead, and that's our ticket. Yeah. Our free gift, golden ticket, going to the chocolate factory. Chocolate factory in the sky. Yeehaw. No spaghetti monsters there. It's all chocolate, man. Come on. That's what we hope in, is his return, his actual, that's maybe even the better place to go. I've never thought about this till this moment. So after it's, do you believe in Jesus being risen from the dead? Not in Jesus. Do you believe Jesus is risen from the dead? Is he God? Okay. Number 3, is he coming back? Ooh. That takes the nail out of the coffin, don't it? Is he coming back? What happens then? Very fascinating questions, aren't they? That's probably where we should go with the person who says, I'm a Christian evolutionist. We should go there first. And only after that, when they say, yes, he's coming back, what's going to happen then? He's going to restore it to like what? I mean, you with me? He's going to restore it to like what? Before man evolved? Before death came for man to evolve? Right? I mean, how many pieces fall apart before you get to Genesis? That's just it, right? How much of it's gone already? And those are the things that really matter more than Genesis. The only reason Genesis matters is because the reason you can get rid of it is you've gotten rid of these things. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It's true. It's history. I believe it, right? I believe it happened. I don't know how. I actually think we haven't taken Einstein's theory of relativity seriously enough. Time, space, and all that, and we're sitting here trying to add up the numbers? I mean, come on. For peace, that's a whole different thing. But, well, I mean, I could touch on that. Not very well. I'm no physicist. But if at the speed of light, time slows down, and the first day there was only light, I mean, do the math, right? And I'm not saying that there were millions of years that day. I'm saying we can't see that day. We can't. Who knows? What I mean, it was the speed of light for 24 hours and there was nothing there. I don't know, right? That's what it says. It's not until we actually start seeing stuff become, what's the right word? More tangibly in rotation. But then you have this clear language in Genesis 1. Day 1, there's only light. Light and darkness. No? Day, well, it doesn't call it day. It does later, but at first it calls it evening and morning. So you can be like, well, evening and morning is a symbolic. Okay, the whole thing's symbolic, right? I get it. That's your position. It's all symbolic. It's really weird. If I'm going to tell a story about mythology, why would I talk about evening and morning so in such a focused way and then call it a day if I didn't want it to be a day, especially when the whole thing's going to add up to 7 of them being a week, which is still the way we have to tell time today. I mean, I might do the day thing, like the days up to the week, but why on earth would I add evening and morning the first day, evening and morning the second day? Light and darkness, right? And it only gets the sun and the moon later, right? Those things are put in place to handle the light and the darkness of the evening and the morning because the definition of this time is built into that first day of let there be light as well. Anyhow, I mean, how the physics worked out, I don't care. And I'll give you one more reason why I don't care. I mean, I do care. I'd love to know. But I don't think we can know. And there's one more reason. Which would be, I guess, the next place I would go. So, okay. Is he risen? Is he God? Is he coming back? What happens then? Did we fall into sin? So before you go to Genesis 1 and argue about the days and the mornings and the evenings and all that fun stuff, which everyone would love to do, hit Genesis 3 first. Right? Genesis 3. Because if we fell into sin, well, that would be where death came from. But that's almost a side issue. That's the Romans 5 point. It's almost a side issue, though. What happened then? What was the fall then? Right? So what the Bible says is there's going to be thorns where there weren't thorns before. I know why it's popping. It's coming through there. There's going to be thorns where there weren't thorns before. There are going to be animals that don't eat only plants anymore. Right? Now, this seems pretty radical to me. That's a big, what do you call it, evolutionary leap, right? Those big places where we can't figure out what happened because there are so many changes at once. Yeah. Flood. And it's a totally different issue. So thorns, animals, eating stuff, right? Of course, the warfare between humans is problematic. And death is problematic. But with those things, so you then have this other moment. And I'm not sure my imagination on this one is correct, but I really do believe it is. So after all this curse thing happens, and they're given the promise they're going to be saved from the curse, they are then removed from God's presence in this Garden of Life, Garden of Eden place. Yeah. And they're not just kind of like, hey, we're going to shut the gate. There's this, not just any angel either. It's a seraphim. I mean, these are like the big friggin' six-winged fiery guys, right? There's only 4 of them that we know of. And there he is, boom, with his flaming sword. Huh? And I can't help but think that that's a little bit bigger deal than like they got pushed out of Disneyland and the angel's like, man, I got a guard duty now. And he shuts the gate and he stands there with his sword. I imagine a completely majestic, transcosmic, radical de-evolution of everything. The only thing I can really compare this to, what was that? It used to be like a movie. It was like the beginning of movies in like the 90s. And I was at Universal, and they'd have like this dark planet rotating, and then they'd have lights coming on all the way and just spreading across the whole Earth, right? It's like that for the universe, only it's fire. And as the fire goes through, like the pretty rose that you could like eat or something, now suddenly has thorns on it, right? The nice lion, he's licking the lamb, and he's biting his head off the next second as it goes by, right? It just changes everything. Changes everything. And then we want to sit here from however many odd years later, I think it's 6,000, 7,000, I don't know. I don't care that much. I only care because people keep wanting to make room for nonsense philosophy and call it science. But we want to sit here from however far back we are, and we're going to peer through whatever math and archaeology we can dig up now, and we want to see through that flaming sword somehow and like do the math on the other side of that. I think that's tomfoolery. I think it's crazy. You want to see to the beginning when we know, if you believe in Jesus, that he's risen, that he's God, that he's coming again to put it back because we fell from it. You want to see past that fall, you're trying to see outside creation itself, which would be a very unscientific thing to do. You're sitting here doing math with carbon dating. Oh, it decays at this rate and always has. How do you know that, man? Especially with what rate did carbon decay at before the fall? You can't do the math to the very beginning without that number. Yeah? So again, Genesis 3 says as much to me as the rest of it. And then, you lay out here, these are other good points. Classical grammatical approach. This is important, but it's not where I'd start. It's not where I'd start. You got to start with Jesus. But what is classical grammatical? It is important. It means we believe, because we believe in logic, we believe that the Bible, because it's written in words that are made with logical sounds and rules of reading and writing and communication, that those rules apply and always have applied. And so when we go to read the Bible, we read it according to the rules of language, and you have to do that or you'll get it wrong. It's really, I wouldn't call it revolutionary. However, in Christianity, sadly, it kind of is a lot of times. Because people just want to say, well, I feel this means that. Okay, great. But it says this. and if you can figure out how to read what, I don't know. I was going to say your tax documents, but that's tougher. If you can figure out how to read the newspaper and know that it meant what it said, then you should be able to do that with much of the Bible. That's kind of the premise. Yeah, we call it the perspicuity of the scriptures. And there are tough things, but they're mainly tough because you just don't know the context. It's not because you don't know. It's not because the words don't make sense. The words do make sense. And sometimes it's tough because the translation didn't know the context. So historical grammatical means we follow the rules of the language in the time. This is why, by the way, when watch me backhand the Baptists. This is why when the Baptists make their argument that baptism just means immersion and not washing, and they go and they take the lexicon from 500 years before the Greek Bible was written, and they use the ancient Greek lexicon instead to do this, they're just playing nonsense games. That's not a historical grammatical approach. That's a grammatical approach outside of history. You're using the words from the wrong language. If I go back to Shakespeare and said, that's really cool, man, he would not understand what I was saying, right? The word changed. So historical grammatical, you got to follow the rules in the time. So knowing Koine, New Testament era Greek, is pretty important if you want to read the Bible carefully. So that would then apply also to Genesis, right? So you read it according to what it says. And then the question becomes, does Moses at any point tell us he's going to tell us a story? Like, if you're going to say Genesis 1, 2, and 3, and we're past the real argument here, right? But if you're going to say Genesis 1, 2, and 3 is just a symbolic story, the question is, so where does it stop being symbol? Now you tell me, where do we start trusting it to be true and not just true-ish, right? Cain and Abel? I mean, there's no miracles there, so why not? How they get married to people, though? I mean, that was like their sisters. No, that's probably just a symbol. Okay, Genesis 5 and 6, the flood shows up there. So flood? Now we're to your question on flood, right? You asked that. So no, not the flood either. Okay. So it's still symbolic with the flood. Okay, 8 people through the ark, all that. So baptism symbolic too, I suppose. And we keep going. 1 Peter 3. I mean, come on. It is called the flood, the symbol of the real thing, baptism, which is interesting. But he doesn't mean the flood's actually a symbol. He means that the real thing is bigger now than the real thing that was then. So not that one. Okay, so we're past that. They're off the ark, but that's all symbol. So what now? Babel? Tower of Babel? Language getting confused? Symbol 2? Okay, keep going. So Abraham, let's see. We're just talking to God. Is that one okay? So we kind of can be okay with that one. What about having the baby with his 100-year-old wife, 90-year-old wife? Symbol 2? Okay. So after that one, let's see, what else? Sacrificing Isaac, I mean, it's not really a miracle, I suppose, on that, but we could go down to, we'll just skip to, there's another one in there somewhere. There's got to be one for Isaac. You get my point, though, right? The thing is, you end up going through the whole book and saying none of it's history. Okay, wow. That is one weird myth to be written pure story like that. So Joseph didn't really exist. The Jews, I mean, if you're making this argument, just get this. You were actually accusing the Jews of not being a people because their entire existence depends on the guy Judah who shows up you're saying he wasn't even real, right? So at the very least, you have to acknowledge like he was a historic person, even if it wasn't all like everything about him was true. Okay, well that's like what, Genesis 32 is before 32, somewhere in the 30s. That's where it's okay. So cool. So in the 30s it becomes history. Somewhere in Genesis 30s, right? It becomes history, and then they go down to Egypt, and then they stay there and stuff, and then 400 years pass, and then Moses in a basket, that's all cool. And then Moses gets like pushed out, okay, that's all cool. And then Moses comes back and he throws in his staff and it turns into a snake. And then he makes water into blood. And then he makes like frogs fall out of the sky. And then he makes like an angel of death pass through the land and kill every firstborn while the sun's not shining over there. Well, is that part real? The thing is, I mean, where do you stop, right? You go through the whole Bible and you're going to get to the resurrection of Jesus. And now you're back where you started. Did he rise from the dead or not? And Jonah was just along the way. The reason Jonah's important is because Jesus also believed Jonah came out of the water after 3 days and nights or whatever, the fish. Because he says that was a picture of me, what I'm going to do in the earth. And that's really what it's all about. Always has been about that. Yeah? So it's not like it's not tied together. We want to treat this Bible like it's just like a bunch of strings and we can pull them out and not have the whole shirt unravel. It's Jenga, man. How many pieces are you going to pull away before it all falls down? And why, if you're actually building the foundation of your salvation, would you pull a single block out of the Jenga tower? If you're not playing a game trying to see who's the coolest, why would you not build the strongest foundation you can? Why would you not trust the words of the ever-living man? It doesn't make any sense. I don't think I'm being unreasonable. So you accuse me of being too passionate. I'm not angry. I just get loud when I get excited, and I'm smiling. You accuse me of being passionate if you like, right? You accuse me of being bigoted or whatever, man. You go ahead. You be the bigot and call me the bigot. But don't tell me that I'm not reasonable. This has been eminently reasonable based on one belief, that Jesus isn't dead. And even that's a reasonable assertion. Oh, we got to do that one too? Yeah. There's books about that, man. I'm talking to the skeptic here, right? There are books about that. They're not. Nope. You can't go read about it on Reddit usually. No, you're right. Yeah. You're not going to get a fair hearing from, what's the guy's name? I can't remember his name now. Another angry post-cultist who still teaches New Testament stuff somewhere. Oh, what's his name? I can't think of it. You're not going to get a fair hearing in those places. But the long and short is, historically speaking, there is no explanation for Christianity Excuse me, I told you I was going to cough. You cannot explain Christianity's existence reasonably without an empty tomb and appearances of Jesus to skeptics and unbelievers who didn't believe before the tomb was empty. Those two things have to be there, or there is no explanation for where Christianity came from. You can't, it doesn't make any sense. So you're asserting things you have to believe at that point. Christianity just happened. Okay. Based on what evidence? It's a weird thing to happen. All these Jews stop worshiping on Saturday. They still haven't stopped doing that if they don't believe in Jesus. The only difference is now they don't believe in Jesus, right? The ones who rejected Jesus still worship on Saturday. The ones who saw him, believed that he was alive in their small town, Jerusalem, and would be a small town today, they all started worshiping on the day he rose. Crazy thing that. Let go of the Torah, for Pete's sake. They didn't let go of the whole Torah, but they realized the real meaning of the Torah. And what the worship day was about is the word of the Lord. So it's eminently reasonable. What's not reasonable to me is to try to be a Christian, to say I want to be a Christian, and then need the philosophy of evolution so badly that you'll let it take away your Christianity, and then assume that it will not impact the rest of your Christianity. That's a massive assumption. That it's like a smorgasbord, right? I'll just pick and choose all the way down the line and it will have no impact on my bill at the end of the day. Huh? Whereas, you're over there in science and whatever the dogma is, right? Whatever the mainstream has told you have to believe, it's settled science now, which should be the last thing. Settled science should be the last words a scientist ever say. If they really care about knowledge, they want to retest it every time. Gravity, is it still working? Let's find out. Looks like it. That's good. But why? How? Maybe I should do the math again if I really care, right? Especially if I want to break the rules somehow. You got to keep messing with it. Maybe the rules are wrong. Maybe we haven't figured out how to break gravity because we assume it's all settled. That's science, man. That's what makes science awesome. That's why science fiction's amazing. That's how we got these little things, like these screens, these supercomputers in our pocket, tricorders. Hey, beam me up. That's science. It's awesome. But you treat that like a religion, and then you treat your religion like it's a hobby. And again, my whole point is, I just think that's kind of weird. I think it's kind of weird. If you believe he's risen, and he's God, and he's coming back to put things back the way they were before they fell, as he created them. I don't think I am. I am the mad Christian. Rock on, I'll see you tomorrow.